Today's guest on Origins, Dr. Don DeYoung, has a PhD in physics and is chairman of the Science and Mathematics Department at Grace College in Indiana, where he has been on staff since 1972. He is also president of the Creation Research Society and an author of many books which are available at the website www.creationresearch.org. Dr. DeYoung can be reached at Grace College, 200 Seminary Drive, Winona Lake, Indiana, 46590. Dr. DeYoung speaks on creation topics and believes that the details of nature are a powerful testimony to the Creator's care for mankind.
We are back with Dr. Don DeYoung, and we're talking about the moon, our closest solar neighbor, and we've talked about the origin of the moon and the age of the moon. Talk to us, sir, about design.
Well, the moon, Don, is designed. And that's, I think, the refreshing part of the creation view, that there's reasons and purpose. The moon's not there by chance or accident, but it's planned. And so the question comes up, what's the moon good for? Would you miss it if it was gone? You know, what does it really do for us? Well, if you look closely, there are reasons. We don't know them all, but the moon has much design as part of it. In fact, you can compose a list to get to thinking about it, and the list goes on and on. Of course, the moon is a nightlight. And some nights there's a full moon, some nights a crescent, some nights not a light at all. But it's important to agriculture. And I know we have street lights, but for a lot of the world, this moonlight is important, and certainly in history it has been. So we have the light aspect of the moon.
And could I just add to that, you know, one of the things as I get older that I see is just the artistry, aesthetics of God. I think when you talk about it being a nightlight, you have to add to it that it's not only gives light, but it adds beauty.
Well, it certainly does.
Yeah.
Any time of year. The moon is so faithful in its phases. If you get familiar with them, you can tell time by it. It's a clock. And you can tell direction by the moon. It's a compass. We've learned in just the last couple of decades that the moon stabilizes our seasons. And it's why we have summer, winter, spring, and fall.
Really? Okay.
Without the moon, the Earth's axis would wobble, and we would never know what's coming next season-wise. The moon is so dependable. You know, we can predict decades ahead of time when there's going to be an eclipse of the moon. And that's a fascinating area. There's actually two kinds of eclipses. One is when the moon moves through the shadow of the Earth and we have a lunar eclipse. It happens once or twice a year, and at that time the full moon doesn't disappear, but it turns kind of a brownish red color as it moves in and out of the shadow. We know when this is going to happen years ahead of time, to the very minute, because the moon in its orbit is following the gravity laws that the Creator established. The whole system is so dependable. There's another kind of eclipse that's even more interesting, and that's when the sun gets covered up, a solar eclipse. Now, most of us have seen a partial eclipse before, when the sun is, some of it's covered, but especially glorious is a total eclipse. They're very rare. At a given point on the Earth, maybe once every 4 centuries does this occur, where it gets dark at noon and the stars come out and the birds get confused because they start to roost, and then 3 minutes later the sun comes out again. Well, I wanted to mention that we're living at a special time. In fact, across North America, in just a few years, we're going to have a total eclipse. And that shadow will move directly on a diagonal across the country, as this map shows, and that's the year 2017. And some of us have waited a long time to see a total eclipse, so it's going to be rather exciting. And even though they're very rare, when they do occur, they come in pairs. So then there's going to be another eclipse in 2024.
Wow.
Just the exactness of these predictions, that we can do this to the very minute, because there are laws of nature that keep the whole place dependable for us, established by the Lord. That season idea is kind of fascinating. You know, the Earth goes around the sun and keeps the same tilt, and so we have the sun above the equator in summer and below the equator in winter. And again, without the moon orbiting the Earth, the axis would change. And if the angle got smaller, then the seasons would go away. And if it got larger, seasons would be more dramatic. We need the moon to give us the seasons we have. And isn't that even what Genesis 1 says, that the moon is for days and seasons and times? It even gives us the seasons that we enjoy.
Wow.
We don't understand gravity, but the water of the earth is pulled by the moon, and back and forth the water surges, and many of us have been to the shoreline to see that. Actually, there are some places on this planet where the tides are very dramatic, and there's an area up in Canada between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. It's the Bay of Fundy, where the tides change by 55 feet.
Wow, that's a lot of change.
There's a resonance there with this bay, which is hundreds of miles in size, as the water washes back and forth. And if you go up there, you can go to what's called Hopewell Rocks, and you can walk around on the floor of the sea when the tide is out. Wow. But then you better leave before the tide comes back, or you'll be 55 feet underwater, and it's just an interesting place. In fact, really, there's even a lot of energy potential there to harness that back and forth motion of the water, and in this day of energy shortage, that's being looked at, lunar energy from the tides.
I've never heard of that.
Well, this list that we've been talking about with all of the design of the moon and its purposes, I put one more at the end of the list and mention life. And by that, I actually mean your life and mine. There's something even more special about the moon. The tides keep the ocean stirred up, responsible for probably over half of the currents in the ocean. Well, there's a lot of life in the ocean, both animals and plants. There are floating plants, plankton, we call it the grass of the sea, and there's also kelp forests. And we remember that plants breathe the opposite of us. They give off oxygen. Current estimates are that over half of our oxygen comes from sea plants.
Wow.
Now think of this scenario. If there was no moon, then there would be no tides, the ocean would become stagnant, the plant life would die, there goes the oxygen, there goes us.
Wow.
I believe that our very breath is dependent on the moon keeping the ocean stirred up and healthy. And again, who knows what other ways that the moon protects us and takes care of us that we haven't even brought to mind yet. But I think this all makes the moon very exciting as just an interesting nearest neighbor of ours. We saw earlier that we don't know where it came from, and if we don't understand the moon from a scientific perspective, what do we know about as far as deep space? Creation just seems to cry out in every way. And the moon might be quiet in the sky, but there it is, a silent witness for us to enjoy and look at. I really think that the moon is one of the best witnesses that we have of the biblical supernatural creation.
It's a silent witness to our creation. I think that's awesome. You know, when I hear you talk about the moon, and I hear these other theories that it's spun off of the Earth, or the Earth captured this thing that was flying by, any random explanation detracts from the obvious truth that the Earth needs the moon. And so God created the moon when He created the Earth to work together to sustain our lives.
Well, they do, and we still have a lot to learn about the Earth-Moon system. The more we see, the more we can see the Creator's fingerprint.
Thank you, sir. You've given us some great information and a great perspective that shows us so clearly God's design. In looking at the moon, we see His design for the Earth and for our lives and how much He cares about us. It's been a great gift you've given us. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, Don.
And I hope you have enjoyed Dr. DeYoung being with us as much as I have, and I hope he's spurred your interest. You know, he's presented some information that really only creation explains, and I hope you'll wrestle with that. Remember, my friend, it's God's view that He created you. That should be your worldview, too. I hope you'll join me again soon here on Origins, and until then, God bless you, my friend.
Thank you for watching this edition of Origins. To get a copy of the information presented today, you can download a PDF file of program number 1108 from our website at www.originstv.org. Or for a DVD of this series, send a $12 donation to cover shipping and handling and write to Origins, program number 1108, Cornerstone Television, Wall, Pennsylvania 15148.